Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from Baltimore, Maryland, the home of the Peabody Institute at Johns Hopkins University. My name is Abra Bush, and I'm the Senior Associate Dean of Institute Studies here at the Conservatory. I'm absolutely delighted you could join us today for our conversation about the pipeline into college. Before we get started, I'd like to thank a few folks that are joining us today and supporting this event on the back end. You won't necessarily see them, but without these folks, we couldn't make this happen. Adam Scalici from Peabody's production team is monitoring the webinar and working through any technical challenges we have. Anna Harris from the Concert and Ensemble Office will provide additional support in the background. And Christina Mancior from Peabody's Launchpad is here to help me curate your questions. In addition, there's a whole team of folks, especially Lauren Krull from marketing, who helps us with these events every week. A huge thank you to all of them. A few quick notes before we begin. For those of you that haven't done so already, please hop into the chat and introduce yourselves to both the panelists and the attendees. We'd love to hear from you, know that you're here, and know where you're from. In addition, we really hope you'll consider this an interactive session and continue to post in the chat throughout, should you wish to. The presenters will spend about half their time on presentations, after which we'll reserve the remainder of the time for questions and comments from you. Place any questions into the Q&A area of the webinar so we can easily find them and sort them to prepare for the panelists. Note that the presenters have agreed to allow us to record this webinar today. The session will be posted to the Peabody Keep Teaching website within the next few days and emailed to all of you who registered. Thanks so much. We will get it up as soon as we can. And now, without further ado, I'm thrilled to welcome our guests for today. Their bios are all available on our website, so I won't go into all of the details. However, joining us today are Rebecca Bogers, Dean and Director of New England Conservatory's Preparatory School, Charles Grode, President and Executive Director for the Merit School of Music in Chicago, Illinois, Maria Mathieson, Director of the Peabody Preparatory here in Baltimore, Maryland, and Stanford Thompson, founder and executive director of Play on Philly and founding board chairman of El Sistema USA. Greetings to all of you. Thanks again for being here. As we get started, I wanted to turn first to Stan. Stan, over the years, I've heard you talk about sort of the pathway to conservatory study or collegiate music study as a bridge. And I'd love to hear you talk to us a little bit about that and share that model with the guests today.
Sure. Thanks, Abra, so much for having me, and also my colleagues that are also joining me in this conversation. We want to provide some context to our individual presentations and group discussions by anchoring kind of the K-12 space we work in across the entire journey a professional musician will travel. While we recognize that every young musician will face tremendous challenges on the pathway towards a professional career, we also clearly understand that there are severe imbalances of equity that are systemic and cultural. And you will certainly hear from all of our presentations about ways that our programs and organizations are trying to tackle that. So we recognize these challenges. We understand where some of these issues are coming from, and in our cities of Baltimore, Chicago, Boston, and Philly, we see many kind of cultural equity issues that are based on race and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, geography, that really disproportionately affect the diverse young musicians that are interested and passionate about achieving what I believe many of us in this Zoom room have done. So you will see in a moment a concept that I helped to develop with two friends from the Curtis Institute of Music, or my time there at Curtis, Shay Scruggs, who returned to Curtis recently as their Director of Institutional Research and Chief Enrollment Officer, after a performing career as an oboist with the San Francisco Opera and the Baltimore Symphony Orchestras. And also trombonist Weston Sprott, who is currently the second trombonist of the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra and Dean of Juilliard's Preparatory Division, overseeing their pre-college and music advancement program. In partnership with the New World Symphony, we kind of retired the former musicians pipeline conversation that usually ignores the unique supports that underrepresented musicians need. And we decided to construct a more dynamic kind of visual representation of the phases of musical development and equitable supports that need to be in place in order for BIPOC musicians to kind of sustain progress towards their musical destination. So what you will see on the screen, and I will describe for anybody that might be joining us without the mode of a screen, but the first phase being entry in early years. These are in-school music programs, community music schools that are working really hard to put instruments or even provide vocal training for the very, very first time. We know that there are a lot of challenges in this space, especially within public school systems, where funding is much tighter, and also the cost of other extracurricular programs tend to be significantly cheaper. Then the second phase being kind of the high school and pre-college space. This is where pre-college programs, youth orchestras, even regional or statewide kind of honor bands and orchestras exist in this space. And we know that this is a really critical time where young musicians are making that final decision if they want to continue pursuing a career as a professional musician. Layered on top of all of that work are also other challenges. How to help these students get into competitive summer camp programs, how to also help them acquire instrument upgrades, or even help them prepare for college auditions. This then propels a musician into the third phase, into the college and conservatory space. I tend to use the word conservatory to also talk about schools of music at universities. But we know that this is the most pivotal point in the journey that can help set up musicians with the networks that they need, the level of mentorship, and even sponsorship. This then propels them into a pre-professional phase, kind of will lump grad school programs, fellowship programs, perhaps that orchestras run, or even training programs, things like the New World Symphony, the Chicago Civic Orchestra, Symphony and C, for example, those types of initiatives. And in that phase, those programs tend to have very high success rates in really propelling musicians into the fifth phase of being a young professional. And this is usually the time where a musician will really become grounded and on hopefully a shorter runway to a place where they can sustain themselves financially by performing and or teaching music. This entire concept, again, is held up by 5 equitable parts of support, which kind of will break out a little bit more, but in areas of psychological and behavioral preparation, the mental preparation that musicians need to navigate obstacles, the technical training, the logistical and financial support, organizational support, and then also talent identification and opportunities. And what we did several years ago is that we took the stories of musicians of color that completed the entire journey, and we asked them to tell us from the moment they touched their instrument to the day that perhaps they received their notice of tenure in an orchestra, or they were fully planted perhaps as a freelancer in their community, of what happened. And combining all of these stories, about 35 to 40 different stories, we then started to describe the challenges and the needed resources. And as we are depicting within this bridge matrix, is that if all of those equitable supports can be in alignment, that is what helps propel the musician to the next level. So with this, knowing that we will focus our conversation today on the entry and early years and the high school and pre-college years, wanted to again put this in a much larger context of why we are super biased to why we believe the work that we do in the K-12 space is perhaps the most important work. So with that said, would love to turn it back to Abra.
Thanks, Dan. I love this concept and I love the clarity of this concept. And so building on this, I now want to turn to each of you to talk about how your organization is helping to develop and establish these pathways into college for your community's unique, economically underserved student populations. I was told as this group organized themselves that the gentlemen were supposed to go first. So I will turn first then to Charlie to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in Chicago and at the Merit School of Music. Charlie?
Thanks, Abra, and thanks, Dan, for both of you setting the table so beautifully. And all I will say about gentlemen going first is there is truth in the statement that the best defense is a good offense. So thank you for giving me the honor of going first. And I will just say it's a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate the chance to participate alongside this group of colleagues, really smart and funny and hardworking group. And glad to be around the table, and also just really happy to present work from Chicago on behalf of all of my colleagues at Merit School of Music and everyone involved in the Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative. So I am just going to throw into the chat website addresses for both Merit and CMPI, and then also just going to share screen here. So hopefully you all can see this. If someone on the panel can give me a thumbs up, we're good to go. Great. I just want to give a little bit of background. I'll cover quickly. As I said, I'm here on behalf of Merit and also on behalf of CMPI. So really quickly, so when Chicago Public Schools cut funding for the arts back in 1979, Merit was born to really begin to provide sustained access to great music education and all of the transformation that can bring about in a young person's life, especially young kids from traditionally underrepresented backgrounds. Then when we, to celebrate our 40th birthday in 2019, we had the pleasure of launching and leading Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative. This is a multi-organization collaborative. It involves 9 leading youth and music-focused organizations here in Chicago to really build on that foundation of what I described as being Merit's focus, but obviously focusing very much on those young musicians who desire to have a career in music professionally. And I would just say that all of the work around CMPI began for Merit in the initial convening back in New York in December of 2016, hosted by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. They supported our planning process and support the multi-year project that Merit is really proud and happy to lead. So just want to give them the appropriate thanks and kudos. And also to say that we've had a number of other individual and foundation funders here in Chicago who have stepped up as they've learned about CMPI and are really thinking about sustained support for that initiative. So very quickly, in terms of CMPI, who are we? Structurally, as I said, there are 9 organizations. You can see the logos for each of those. And this is really, to go back to Stan's bridge concept, the pathway or the bridge entirely is represented in our anchor advisory organizations, everything from introductory up through the professional experience. And then we have a much larger group of affiliate organizations, 40 or more, who really are focused on providing those supports that are outlined in the bridge and matrix concept, and also recommending students, and also providing faculty and other kinds of support for the project. And I would say we cast the net widely because Chicago has a history of pretty significant collective impact work. And so that was the model we followed in our planning process and in our implementation process. I would just say that as we think about our student musicians, we really want to assess them carefully. We know that this is a lifelong 360-degree set of supports that we need to offer. And so we really want to be attentive to what are the needs not only of populations broadly speaking, but what are the needs of those individual fellows who are part of our program so that they can reach their full potential musically. And I would say what that has meant in terms of fellow numbers in these first years, we have committed to 150 fellows over the first 3 years of the program. We had 7 graduate from the program last year. All 7 of those were accepted into top tier conservatories or college music schools. In year 2, we have 14 seniors in this class. 13 of those 14 have been accepted into at least one top tier college or conservatory. And I would say one of them has been accepted to 7 of the 8 schools they've applied to and has been offered more than $1 million in financial aid total. So just to ground what our work is in terms of structure and how we assess and support and the number of fellows. So with that in place, I wanted to just move on to spend a little more time on what's unique about CMPI. First and foremost, the oversight structure that we have. And this is really, we are so fortunate in the experience and the depth of really knowledge that our project leader, Adrian Thompson, brings to this program. She has put together a great team that involves also a project manager, 2 student navigators, and we hope to be able to bring on board an additional student navigator and maybe student engagement coordinator as we look to have our full 150 fellow complement. So I just want to give a shout out to Adrian. As we and particular others on this call will know, she is a tremendous teacher. And I would say the project is what it is because of what she brings. And I also want to give a shout out to Kurt Gildow, who's our Dean and VP for Educational Affairs at Merit, who works closely with Adrian. The 2 of them have really focused on building rapport and a deep foundation of trust with our advisory organizational leadership. That's really the foundation of whatever we are able to do for our students. In terms of the program structure, I won't cover all this in detail. I will just say that one of the things that's been critical in our success is that each prospective fellow receives a home visit from a member of the CMPI staff so that we can get a sense of what is the environment in which this individual student would learn. And that is a visit that requires the participation and support of every member of the family living in that home. So really talking about what that individual student needs at the ground level. That's become virtual in the last year, but when it's possible, that will happen again in person. This is, I think, a program that's about setting clear, high expectations for our fellows and then devising supports, again, from that matrix concept. What does that individual student need by way of supports to help achieve success? Also, in terms of those supports, this is a program that is uniquely able to provide those supports. Fellows in Chicago can't get this range of supports from any one organization, but by participating as a CMPI fellow, they get the benefit of the assets that all of those organizations offer. Last week, for instance, we had a great masterclass virtually offered by CSO Zell Music Director Ricardo Muti for 2 ensembles from CMPI, coached them virtually. And I think hopefully that is the beginning of ongoing engagement with our fellows. As I mentioned, we have a broad support team for our fellows, really a village approach. In addition to the CMPI staff I mentioned, there's the private teacher. There's also a professional musician mentor who really acts as a coach and a soundboard for our fellows, and then deep engagement by the parents and other CMPI families. And then lastly, what I would say in terms of program structure, in addition to 2 juries each year, there are 2 advisory sessions that are hosted. This brings together that whole village, that team for each fellow to really reflect on what the experience has been year to date and really to determine what additional supports are needed for the success of this fellow. And finally, the 2 other areas I just want to touch on are really around core values that really guide our decision-making and planning for CMPI. These were values that we developed through our multi-year planning process, and then we've refined them based on the experience of the first 2 years of the project and the input from our CMPI leadership and staff. And the 2 that I want to highlight here are about being student-driven and family-supported. And this has a really critical application because, as many of you know, if you have an organization that's focused on working with kids from traditionally underrepresented backgrounds, if you have a really outstanding student of color, you celebrate that student, you support them, and you historically really want to hold on to them because they're a definition of your success. And so this value has really been pivotal for us as a group to say, if we believe that we are focused on student success, on the private instruction end, we have to hold ourselves accountable and say, does my institution have the teacher that will help this particular kid really achieve success? And if not, how do I set that up, initiate a conversation through CMPI, right, so that we can bring about a new appointment for that student that's going to really put them on the path to success. And I know all of you on this call, right, would know that that's a very tricky, nuanced conversation, but it's one that's been central, and this value has helped us navigate that. I would say in terms of being focused on systems change, really what this has been a series of conversations with our advisory council group saying, okay, what do we need to do in the early years to prepare our fellows for success later on? And also we've had input from those receiving organizations to say, here's what we would like you to train your students to do to make them more successful here. And then it enables a conversation where we can also say, you need to change as receiving organizations, and here are some ideas about what that might look like. Lastly, in terms of professional development, each of us, right, continues to be a work in progress. And so we have a dedicated commitment to offering PD for our CMPI staff and faculty. Most recently, we've had a handful of private teachers for CMPI take part in the Advancing an Anti-Racist Orchestra offered at Juilliard by Alex Lang. It's planting some seeds, obviously, in those teachers and in their organizations here in Chicago. And lastly, we also benefit from membership in Enrich Chicago. This is a cohort of not-for-profit arts organizations here, really focused on anti-racism and providing anti-implicit bias and anti-racism training, which obviously impacts the conversations not only at CMPI level for the fellows, but also within our organizations as well. So I realize that's a bit of a whirlwind tour, but wanted to just walk you through what has been happening, what we're proud of, and what we're still working through in Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn now to Stan for a parallel presentation. What's going on in Philly?
Sure. So first of all, I'm thankful to Charlie because he just explained 70%. So I will not take you through a lot of the same things that we are doing or philosophies that we believe in, but I will set this up by saying that Adrienne Thompson, who runs the Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative, happens to be my mother. So I grew up with her times 30 each and every day. We always would say in my house that you only ate dinner on the days that you practice. And my 7 siblings and I were all involved in music. 4 of the 8 of us went into music professionally. I have another brother that studied bass at Curtis, a little sister that was actually runner-up as a percussionist for Curtis. We almost had 3 in there at the same time. We'll, just say that through the program, through the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra's talent development program, which is very similar to what CMPI is accomplishing in Chicago, very similar to the Philadelphia Music Alliance for Youth Artists Initiative in Philadelphia, that I was provided the same level of support, especially as both of my parents, who are both retired music educators, things that they struggled financially with trying to provide so many kids in our home, but also a lot of information. Things like going to Interlochen in the summers, making sure that I had good teachers along the way. So certainly just kind of wanted to frame that by the time I left Curtis, I learned about the El Sistema program of Venezuela. My reaction to all of this was launching Play on Philly in 2011. Some of the things that make what we do a little bit different is that all of our programs to our 300 students are provided tuition free. Instruments are loaned, all of the standard orchestral instruments, including harp, all percussion, all woodwind, brass, and strings. but these are programs that are provided 3 hours each weekday for roughly 34 weeks during the school year, and then 8 hours per weekday for 6 weeks in the summer in residence at Temple University. And this was just our expression of providing an equitable space where students had the space to practice every single day. And our advantage, they get to practice under the guidance of the 30 professional faculty that we have that work with them. And then arrange lots of musical opportunities for our students, being able to perform with Marin Alsop and Simon Rattle, to be able to perform all over the region, to watch our kids take the stage at TED. And although our students, I would say the majority of them from a musical achievement level, are not at the top levels that we see throughout Philadelphia's various youth orchestra programs. We have had several through the help of our partner programs and also through the PMA initiative that have been able to go to places like Peabody, the Royal College of Music in London, Eastman, and also be able to play in summer camps at Brevard and Swanee and Interlochen, the Carnegie Hall Youth Orchestra program. I don't know why I'm blanking right now, National Youth Orchestra. So those have been really great. What we have noticed is that the amount of support it takes from the moment they touch the instrument, the amount of education the parents need to understand what the journey looks like. The kids always want to quit in the third week when they realize that you have to play certain notes at certain times and hold the bow a certain way. So there's a lot of work that goes in on the front end, as we have watched a handful of our students over the past 11 years, probably numbering around 45 of maybe the 1,200 that we've put in to really, really push into careers in music therapy, music education, and performance. And internally, we have a private lesson program we call Play on Philly Emerging Artists Collective that again provides that space as our students are auditioning into local groups, national summer camps, but also trying to gain entrance into the Philadelphia Music Alliance for Youth. So again, to not repeat everything that Charlie has said and to pass it on to my colleagues, that we believe in the same philosophy, the same type of goals and support, and glad that we can do it in such a collaborative environment in Philadelphia and also a collaborative national environment as well.
Stan, thanks. Again, impressive what's going on there in Philadelphia. We're going to go a little farther north now, up to Boston. Rebecca, I'll turn to you and find out what's going on up there in the frozen north. That's not so frozen right now. It's glorious springtime. When was the last snow, Rebecca?
Yeah, it was not too far distant past, but we have seen the daffodils emerging here in Boston, and looking forward to the light in spring and hope ahead. So thank you so much to Abra and everyone for having us here. I just want to echo my colleagues about what a privilege it is to be able to be a part of such an incredibly rich ecosystem of music educators around the country. And I'll echo Stan to say we are certainly biased in this group towards the K through 12 area and the importance of what I really imagine is the breadth of the bottom of a pyramid building towards the professional musician, and how important it is to create the broadest base for pathways of excellence into the future. I think we've done a lot of thinking over the years about the role that artists play in shaping history and choosing both what is included and then either accidentally or intentionally left behind, and how important it is for us to take this period as a time of reckoning to imagine a more inclusive future in classical music and every industry as well. So we have been approaching this on a number of different levels here at NEC. again, focused on the earlier sections of this bridge concept that Stan shared, the early musicianship days, as well as that critical pre-college period. So I will say that we always have the gentleman go first because Charlie does such a wonderful job of sharing out all of our values for us, and therefore we don't have to repeat any of them, and it's wonderful to be aligned in this way of creating an inclusive environment. So let me share my screen a bit here as well. So again, happy to be joining from the slightly sunny today, Boston, up here at the NEC Preparatory School. I think the reason we do this work and the reason that partnership is so critical is that our collective impact will always have a larger impact on what have been a number of barriers that have been created over years. And if we want to really inspire systematic change, it really takes all of us coming together in this ecosystem to create that kind of impact. And I think that's something that our students feel, this idea of knowing that there really is an entire village around them. It's not about any one organization succeeding, it's about the students succeeding, and then we have all succeeded together. So we launched kind of 3 main initiatives around this about 3 years ago. And I'll talk briefly through them. The first is our Musical Explorers program. This is a program geared towards Boston 3rd graders specifically, and this is about the entry level. This is about creating space for the musically curious. And it's a 6-week program. It's an introduction program. All of the instruments are provided. The program is provided for $50, so almost free, but still a small registration fee for the instrument and the instruction. It's about building community. The lessons are offered in group lessons about creating that space to explore music, whether it be through singing, eurythmics, and then some group lessons on trumpet, trombone, and guitar and double bass are the instruments that we've started with. And from there, hopefully creating, again, that broader space of access and pipeline and recruitment into what could be more serious study for those who continue to pursue it. So creating that space of interest is really critical. We too are very lucky to have received the support from the Mellon Foundation, both in planning and creating, as well as the implementation of this program. And I think one of the things that makes programs like BEAM and PMA and CMPI such a success is actually that we have each other. And so that means that we're able to bounce off of each other as sounding boards to learn from each other. It is a learning process. If this work was easy, it would already have been done. And so we're very fortunate to have both funders and colleagues who encourage the exploration of finding out different pathways that are going to work. And I want to point out that we have 2 goals in BEAM. First, of course, to increase the number of students who are going into these post-secondary programs to support this pathway into the future. And that is the main focus of all of the work that we do in BEAM. We are also very fortunate so far to have had a 100% success rate with our seniors going into that musical study space. I just heard the other day of one of our seniors this year who's been accepted so far to all of the schools that she applied to, including the New England Conservatory. And we were also very fortunate to have from our first graduating class of BEAM last year, one senior who continued on to study at the New England Conservatory and is now a freshman there studying. So that's a wonderful bridge piece from the K through 12 into the collegiate space as well. But more importantly, also, is this secondary goal as we think about developing each of our organizations and the work that we can be doing to create that space, thinking about who we want to be a part of our organizations and how do we go about welcoming them into the space, or perhaps even reimagining and redesigning our spaces to create spaces that are more inclusive. And this is where I think actually there's been a wonderful opportunity this year in the role of the digital space that allows us to even more easily come together, even in conversations like this one today. So at Beam, we have a number of the similar supports that Charlie described in CMPI, focusing with the student at the center. It is about building the village around them, and it's about understanding the pathway of the musician from the curious and passionate to the serious musician. You know, how does one become introduced to music? How does one see that there are pathways? And then at what point does that student decide to become self-motivated, to follow the pathway, but to have the opportunities around them to explore different ways and to have that individual advising. I often talk with students about the training that it takes to become a serious musician and its relationship to perhaps training for the Olympics. If you are going to pursue something that it is so rigorously involved, so competitive, it really does take full buy-in, not just from the musician, but as Stanford and Charlie have mentioned, from the family as well, from every network around them, to be focused on finding that destination towards the platform of a serious musician as well. So in Boston, we've been growing from 59. Our goal is to reach 75 students by the end of year 3. We're in year 2 right now, offering a number of different core curriculum pieces. We also are spread out in partnership, as you saw earlier, with the Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra, the Community Music Center of Boston, Project STEP, and the Boston Symphony Orchestra. These founding partners play a critical role in the development of our Beam students. One of the things that makes us a little bit unique from Chicago is that our students are hosted individually by parent organizations, but take activities throughout the consortium. So again, it is about finding that pathway through multiple resources and identifying the strengths that each of our organizations can bring through the table, but also being willing to acknowledge that not any one of us has the full solution. I think there's a horn honking in the background there. And finally, another critical part of the work that we've done here has been the creation of the Summer Orchestra Institute. Again, this piece acknowledges that the work that we do has to be year-long. It can't be just during the academic year. It can't be just during the years that we want. But if we're going to develop the pathway, it's about every single day of the year. That's how Stan had dinner, by practicing every single day. And then that's how I have dinner, by practicing every single day as well. In the Summer Orchestra Institute, this was the creation based on the El Sistema model and the critical importance of the orchestra to build community. Wanting to be able to create a space that was robust and rigorous, that worked toward this high standard for students to have, and to be a competitive space and platforms for students who may not be ready to go to a 6-week summer program, which can be a huge adjustment to plan to go away for something like that to some of these wonderful programs like Interlochen and the National Youth Orchestra and BUTI. But the Summer Orchestra is a 2-week institute. We offer both a day and a boarding option, and we'll be entering our 2nd year. We missed last summer thanks to the pandemic, but entering into our 2nd year. And we just sent out acceptances actually this past Friday. And I'm very pleased to see that there was just over 30% from underrepresented populations that we've accepted out of our 73 incoming class for this summer. I attribute that also to how we think about building our institutions at every level, which includes the staff and the faculty as well, and the space for creating role models for students, and what that means to create space for belonging as well. So I mentioned to you that about 30% of our incoming class here of the Summer Orchestra Institute represents that. And I attribute that to the fact that about 30% of our faculty is also represented from underrepresented populations in classical music. And this is something that I think is really critical as we continue this work. So there's lots more to say, and I'm going to pass it over back to Abra and the home team.
Thanks, Rebecca. Maria, please.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so delighted to be in this community of colleagues here, esteemed colleagues. And just to give you a little sort of update on what we are doing here in Baltimore, I'm having some technical issues, so Adam is going to assist me with my presentation. So if he can go ahead and share the screen, that would be wonderful. And I will guide him along and guide us along quickly to make sure that we have lots of time for questions and we're available to answer those questions. So moving on kind of as an introduction, Peabody has been part of, or the preparatory has been part of the Baltimore community since 1894. So we're fairly historic. And Adam, you can go ahead and move on to the first slide if you get a chance. There we go. We're really fortunate in Baltimore that we have a really active ecosystem within the community to really help and identify young musicians, help start them off, and then really take them to the next level, depending where those students want to go. We have a wonderful program through partnership with our school systems, and then also with programs like the Baltimore School of the Arts, which is a neighbor to us just up the road. And then with the BSO Art Kids program, which is also a wonderful program that really has helped build a robust ecosystem of artistic learning for our students here in the community. Moving on to the next slide, Anna. We have a wonderful, the programs that we have in place here in Baltimore really sort of serve the breadth of our student population. We have our Tuned In program, and then we are also a recipient of a Mellon Foundation support for the Baltimore Washington Musical Pathways program. That's sort of on the music side of the world. And then also with the preparatory, we also have a fantastic dance program that really replicates a lot of the support and the programming that my three colleagues have also mentioned, but on the dance side of the universe. So I'll talk a little bit about on the dance side as well, just because that's something that we offer sort of as that pathway that really replicates what we're doing in the music field as well. So moving on into the next slide, I'll talk a little bit. All of our programs really have a lot in common. Our students are selected via audition, and we're really looking to identify students from sort of traditionally underrepresented communities in their specific disciplines. For example, with dance, with boys really is the sort of underrepresented group within the dance population. So that's kind of where we're focusing our efforts for our dance program. And like my colleagues, our students are receiving full tuition support for their music and dance study, but we have those holistic wraparound services, recognizing that a lot of our students don't have that history, don't have that background in studying either music or dance at a high level, and really engaging families, which is critical to their success as they head through in their music or dance studies. And I think that's a core part, as you've heard from, I think, all of us, that really is critical to our student success, is that holistic support, that it's not just their music or their dance instruction, that it is a much broader investment and really guidance that helps our students achieve, where they would like to go. Moving on, I'll talk a little bit about, sort of briefly, about our Tuned In program. We started with 3 students, and we now annually serve about 90 students in the program. They range in age from 5 through 21 years old. Again, that bridge concept of having students come in at the earliest years, really at that early point of entry, really starting their exposure, really beginning their musical studies. And then we've also found, particularly as our students have gone on to college, that a lot of our students still need a little bit of support, whether it be through advocacy for at their college level, or even when they come back for the summer, really coming back to spend some time with us. So we found that really expanding that beyond just their sort of the high school point, you've graduated for high school and we send them off, and push them in the pond to swim. We found that a lot of them really do need and want that connection back to our program, and we are happy to kind of keep that connection. And it also serves an example for students coming up and going through the program. Again, sort of the mission of Tuned In is to enact social change through music. We're really developing not only musicians, but leaders, helping them engage with their community and really developing their skills, both as musician and then also as a leader as well. Again, like my colleagues, it's very much you're focused on a private lesson, but we also have all of those additional things like large ensembles, all of those type of things. Where our partnership is really unique, I think, with Tuned In, is a lot of our students are participating either through school programs or through Art Kids, those type of programs. They're spending their weekdays with them, but they're coming to us on a Saturday or over the weekend for their additional weekend studies. So we're really providing that holistic kind of week-long engagement, and they're really deepening their experience through the program. And then moving on into the next slide, we're talking through one of the unique things that we've developed with Tuned In is really this idea of developing sort of the sound of Baltimore and really training flexibility in our musicians. So not only are we training them as classical musicians, we're also really enhancing their skills through improvisation, through developing creative composition, and really developing them as kind of flexible musicians who are equally as comfortable playing Mozart, Beethoven as they are sitting in at a jazz session and being able to really create and develop their own musical voice. And like my colleagues, that selection process really focuses on attempting to really build a really developed pipeline and bridge into musical study. Our next program I'm going to talk a little bit about onto the next slide is we're thrilled that we have been part of a new program that we launched this past year, which is the Baltimore Washington Musical Pathways Program. And Adam, you can move to the next slide if you get a chance. There we go. Thank you. And this is a wonderful, again, like my colleagues, where we are a partner with multiple organizations. We're a little more, our unique sort of feature is that it's actually a regional program where we'll be partnering with partners in Washington, D.C., and really expanding the reach of this sort of regional idea of the ecosystem within the whole Baltimore, Washington region. So we're partnering with the Kennedy Center, Levine Music, and the D.C. Youth Orchestra. And again, we'll be selecting, we have our first cohort going, and then our DC colleagues will be joining us next year, and really working to sort of develop their programming and connection and broadening the horizons of these programs and these students. So this program really sort of functions as the sort of the sharp end of the spear. It's really the top end of the pyramid. These are our students who are really getting ready, seriously considering applying and working towards applying for that next level in the bridge of that sort of college level programs. And we have 3 seniors right now, and we have certainly heard from at least one of them has been accepted just into Peabody. So we're very excited by that, and looking forward to hearing of sort of the rest of our college acceptances, and looking forward to seeing where those students go on and really helping them develop their next level of processing. And then finally, just a little quick bit about, in addition to our music programs, we also have a dance program that really replicates what we're doing in the dance world. And Adam, you can move to the next slide for that. Which is our Estelle dance program. Again, it very much replicates what we're doing in the music world, where our students are given their initial training, they're focused on, they're helping to be developed, we're working with their families and students, and if they want to pursue a career in dance, we are available and working with them to sort of move that forward. So you can see in Baltimore, we very much are replicating what my colleagues are doing in our other communities, and we're thrilled to be part of this conversation. So I'm going to hand back to Abra. I know we've only got 10 minutes for questions, so I want to hand back to her to get going with those.
There are a bunch of really great questions. I'm going to sort of rapid fire them at all of you, if that's okay. First question, and don't hesitate, any of you may chime in. Do any of your programs emphasize or represent voice students? Can voice students participate in any of these? Or are they all instrumental?
I can jump into that. We have a robust voice program at NEC. It's not part of the BEAM program. I should say that the Pathway Foundations from the Mellon Foundation were specifically set up around orchestral instruments. And I think it's important to remember that it's on us to make sure that there are pathways for all instruments and voice and all art forms, actually. So we do have a partnership with the Boston Arts Academy where we've kind of been piloting some work with a couple of voice students as well. But I think that there's a lot of area for growth there.
Right. So I want to just really underscore what Rebecca said. Much of this work has been heavily underwritten by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and we are incredibly grateful to those grants that are supporting these initiatives. They are primarily focused on instrumentalists at this point. So it is not lost, I think, on all of us, and especially me, a singer, that this work needs to extend far beyond just instrumentalists and into the various kinds of music making out there. How has the pandemic created more opportunities for students or your organizations? We all know that's been challenging, but what have you found that has been a value add, I guess, for these students?
I'm happy to jump in there. I think, one of the things that virtual instruction cannot really do is large group instruction. So that's really forced our large ensemble directors to think creatively and look at what's happening in the world around them, knowing it's going to be on their students' minds, particularly when you have a diverse student population. So I would say it's really allowed our large ensembles to dig into the intersection between artistic practice, in this case, music study, and the injustice and inequity we see in our society, not by accident. And so one example of that, our Wind Symphony really had a project that was all about what does an artist do in response to inequity and injustice. And that allowed all of those students to really wrestle with some of that core question and share their answers with their colleagues. So that's one example that gave us, basically, we turned a constraint into an opportunity.
Yeah, and I would just quickly add that we've just been able to bring in folks from all over the world to collaborate with our students, cook up different types of projects, still learning about musical literacy, music history, being able to use their knowledge on their instruments in many type of pretty cool ways. So we certainly will keep doing that on the other end of this pandemic, but I think we're all eager to get back into the classroom.
I was just going to add, I think technology has also taken a huge part, and it's something that I think our students have been very keen on developing, is being comfortable in using technology to enhance their music learning and their literacy.
Yeah, I think I mentioned the importance of the digital experience is really a critical one here. And I think this ties into one of the other questions I saw popping up there too, but how we explore that musical literacy and how we also consider the works by folks of color. And one of the things that we've done at NEC Prep this year is actually to change our concerto competition to a new individual string competition, solo, unaccompanied, since you can't play with anyone online here. But the technology piece allows us to bring in juries from around the country to make sure that that's there, but also to make sure that we're looking at repertoire at every level as well.
So I'll pivot to that question. Could you all tell us what your organizations are doing to diversify the composers and the kinds and genres of music that students are exposed to playing through your programs? Maria, you already addressed that a little bit. Here in Baltimore, it's a hotbed of jazz, and so we do incorporate music of the African American diaspora into what we're doing at Peabody. Rebecca, to your point a moment ago, Charlie or Stan, how is this playing out in your organizations?
Sure. Merit, in addition to being focused on classical instruction and wind, brass, percussion, string, piano, guitar, also has a robust jazz program. So that has been a part of who we are. I would say on top of that, and continues to be a part of who we are, I'd say on top of that, we have, as a part of a broader inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism initiative within our organization, we have a group of faculty members who have been meeting regularly to look at the repertoire that is programmed. And really, we're looking forward to the recommendation from those leaders within our school to what a rubric or an approach should be. So again, we're not going to legislate it, but really it includes a series of prompts to say, how do we think more broadly, more deeply about the repertoire that we're performing, so that all of our students can also see and hear themselves reflected in the work they're studying.
Stan?
Yeah, very quickly, I'll just add that at the level that we work with a lot of our kids, we're able to take pieces of music, arrange them for the levels that the kids are at, so they can begin getting that exposure. We can start having those conversations about the types of people that are writing this, to expose them, knowing though that still, as they progress into other groups, that are still kind of working through how they're going to do less of the traditional stuff and more works by different types of composers. We really try to do our best to expose them from a very, very early age.
Great. The next question really is near and dear to my heart. And it really revolves around the prestigious conservatories and summer music programs that are accepting these students. But really the question becomes about whether or not the student can ultimately afford it, right? My single mom, divorced mom, could certainly not afford some of the things that I was accepted into. So how are we solving for these problems of equity in terms of summer programs and other kinds of opportunities for students?
I mean, I think certainly for the case of for Tuned In, we have that in our budget. That's something that we plan for students who get accepted into those programs, and really work with them to be able to help pay and support them attending some of these wonderful programs, because really that does help, broadens their horizon, really gives them additional opportunity, and lets them see a world beyond what's happening in Baltimore.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the success of the students doesn't rest on any one organization. And that's where these summer programs and conservatories and the programs that students are in have such a large role to play, also in educating each other. I think I just want to remind us all that this is in no way about changing the level. This is about creating pathways to the students who are at the highest level. And as Charlie gave an example of his senior there receiving over $1 million in funding, that's because the student is an extraordinary musician. And our job in the K through 12 space is to create the support systems that these are the most desirable students in terms of level, and to have conversations as we create this larger ecosystems and bring in the summer festivals as well. Yes, there's funding in all of our programs. Yes, there's funding in their programs. It's about working together to make sure that the needs of all of our students are met.
Yeah, thank you. I want to turn to a question that actually in the chat. And it said several of these programs are relatively new. Yes, they are. I mean, many of them were really, they've maybe been around a little while, but they got supercharged with some of these Mellon grants that have happened over the last several years. To initiate your programs, what was the initial investment required, and was there principal funding? Yes, Mellon. And how much of the investment went to management staff full-time versus teaching staff? Can any of you give me a thumbnail on that? This is a really complicated.
This is one thing that the foundation is actually really great about. The majority of our funding is centered with the student. And I would say is largely in the tuition space. It's very specific about not being in there. Each of our organizations, I imagine it's similar in the other cities as well, contribute a number of staff pieces kind of in kind to the project. It's not really in kind because it's our project, and we're happy to do that as part of it. But the majority of the funding not only is centered with the student, but in Boston also follows the student. So if the student changes their activity, that funding follows them.
So the next question here is, through what organizations, if any, have the four of you connected with each other and others who have similar programs? Stan, I'm going to turn to you on that one.
Sure. Yeah, so I mentioned in the chat about the National Instrumentalist Mentoring and Advancement Network that I know for sure we're all connected to. I also put the website in the chat box. I also think probably the most, or maybe all of us, are members of the National Guild for Community Arts Education. Perhaps some of us are connected to NAFME or some other ones as well. So, but I will say there's a lot more informal conversations. I would say that we probably get the most out of, informally connecting. And I know that between Charlie, Maria, Rebecca, and I, we're in contact all the time.
Yeah, yeah. So Niman, there's a parent who placed something in the Q&A about their students being involved in music, but they couldn't afford to kind of keep it going with other options. According to this, you're in Baltimore. Please be in touch with us here at Peabody with the preparatory. We'd be happy to direct you to appropriate resources as they are available. And NEMON, the National Instrumentalist Mentoring and Advancement Network, has been set up just to do exactly this in many ways. So I would suggest that you hop online and take a look at that organization. It's just sort of really finding its feet at this point. So, but we certainly can help you here at Peabody. Lastly, I wanted to ask one more thing. If you had one thing in setting these programs up that you would do differently now that you know, what might that be? And I'm going to go in the same order we started. Charlie, lessons learned. One lesson learned.
Thank you for that. Well, I guess what I would say is get your leadership for your program involved as early as possible in helping to set the direction for the program, the foundation for the program. And if that's not the case, I think really just work to build that rapport, that level of deep trust very early on, recognizing that it's challenging because you're also building an organization within an ecosystem where many already exist. So that personal leadership, that personal connection is deeply important. So just underscoring the importance of that.
Thank you. Stan?
Yeah, I would probably say, I mean, our kids have lots of dreams of getting to these places, kind of musically, setting up their own career. And I would probably say one of the biggest things that I have learned is just not to limit what our kids are able to do, what our parents are able to do to support them. And, you know, I think a lot of hand holding and a lot of firm, empathetic love goes a long way.
Thanks, Stan. Rebecca?
Yeah, I think the question is always, what are we doing to make sure that everybody can thrive? And I think one of the most important things is to make sure that you do have shared expectations and shared accountability of how you're going to move forward in a project so that everyone can get on the same page of what those expectations are from the level of the student, from the level of the staff, from the level of leadership. That's really critical.
And Maria?
I think keeping families engaged and involved throughout the process really has been a critical element for student success. And it's almost as much as you're really working with both hand in hand as the student learns a new skill, the family is involved and really helping them understand what it is that you're attempting to work with their student on.
So I want to say how grateful I am to the four of you for joining us for this conversation today. The work you do is extraordinary and in your organizations every single day. I adore all of you as colleagues, smart, dedicated, and funny people that you are. And I sincerely hope that all of these programs continue to work collaboratively, because I think that there's incredible strength when we line all of these initiatives up and learn from each other and also kind of push this information out into the world. So thank you. I also want to thank Anna Harris, Christina Mancior, Adam Scalici, and the other folks behind the scenes at Peabody who make this series work every single week. We simply could not do it without you, so thank you. There's one more session coming up that will look at how diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are shaping up at conservatories around the country. That session will be in 2 weeks. It's the last one I have planned for this semester because honestly, I think all of us are crawling our way over the finish line right now. So if you can, join us at noon on Tuesday, the 20th, for diversity and anti-racism in the conservatory sector.